The Palmer Academy, and welcome to today's assembly. Now I'm just going to share my screen. Now, I've got some really important information about new school rules. Now, these rules will be put into place when everyone comes back to school after this lockdown period. So when everyone comes back, these new school rules will be in place. Now, some of you are going to love them, and some of you are going to hate them. Some of you might feel, I can understand why they're putting these rules in place. Some of you might feel, okay, so first new school rule will be that your teacher will tell you who your friends can be. So only your teacher will tell you who you can play with at lunch and break, okay, who you're allowed to talk to in the classroom. So beforehand, you could choose your friendships. They happen quite naturally. But the teachers have now decided that only they can teach, only they can now decide who you're going to be friends with, when you can be friends with that person, when you're allowed to talk to them, all those types of things. We feel like it will just make the school a happier place. Okay, next one is that you're not allowed to talk about football at school to anyone. So this is a particularly hard one for myself and Mr. Sharman. It's probably the main topic that we speak to about each other. But even this rule is for teachers. So some of you will be really, really happy about this. Some of you will be really sad. However, it doesn't mean you can't play football at school. You can still play football at school, but you just can't talk about that particular sport at school. When you go outside the school gates, you can talk about it there. But when you're on the school grounds, you're not allowed to talk about football. Next one. Now, you're only allowed to have green apples in your snack box. Okay, we have found that children who are eating green apples don't work as hard. So if you've got a red apple, that's fine, excellent. If you've got a pink lady apple, even better. Okay, but we find that children who have red or pink lady apples, they work so much harder. Okay, so green apples will not be allowed in school. That goes the same for teachers and any other staff. Also, you're only allowed to read books by Enid Blyton. So her books are amazing. We find that the other authors are just not as good. And we've got some of the staff in the school are big fans of Enid Blyton. So they said that rule must come into place. If you don't know who Enid Blyton is, please go and Google her or ask your parents' carers about Enid Blyton. And the last one is that we are not allowed to smile at school. Okay. Apparently smiling uses too many muscles in the face, which then wastes a lot of energy. So we're not allowed to smile at school. So I would like everyone to smile as much as they can before you come back to school, before the lockdown period ends. So do all your smiling before then, but when you come back to school, you are not allowed to smile. Okay. Yeah, so that's today's assembly. Okay. We're also going to talk about this individual liberty. Okay, now obviously, you know, those rules that I just talked about are not, they're not real. Okay, they're just made up, but they will link in with this assembly. So please, you know, you are allowed to choose who your friends are. You are allowed to talk about football. You are allowed to have green apples in school. You are allowed to read books that have different authors apart from Enid Blyton, and you are allowed to smile in school. Okay, in fact, everyone give me a smile right now. Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to talk about individual liberty, which is one of the strands of the British values that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Okay, so the aim is to explain what individual liberty means and to explain everyone's right to individual liberty. So what is individual liberties? Now, what do you think it means? Now, here we have 4 people who are thinking of something they like or like doing, okay? Now, they have the liberty or freedom to think about those things they want to, okay? So they're allowed to think about those things. And many have the freedom to have those things or do those things. Okay, so if I'm looking at those 4 people, what do you think they're thinking about? Okay. Just click on this person. So she's thinking about football, okay? Or she's thinking about sport. So she might be thinking about playing the game, or she might be thinking about her favorite football team, or she might be thinking of this just sport in general, or maybe she wants to play at break time or lunchtime, or maybe outside of school. So she has the freedom to think about what she wants to do, and that's what she wants to do. Let's have a go at this one. So I think he looks like he's thinking about his friends. Yeah, I think that must be his friends. So he's probably thinking about when's he going to see his friends, or if he has just seen his friends. Okay, so he obviously has got the chance to make his own friends, and he's thinking about all the fun things they can talk about. Maybe in the past he talked about having National Story Week. Maybe also tell them a story. Let's have a look. Which one should we go for? The girl or the boy? Let's go for the girl. She's thinking about, I think that looks like a pet dog or a wolf, I'm not really sure. Or maybe it's a pet. Maybe she's thinking about her pet. Maybe she wants a pet, or maybe she has a pet and she's thinking about how she can look after the pet or wants to play with the pet. Or maybe she wants it for a birthday present. She wants to get a pet for a birthday present. Okay. Let's have a look at this one. What do you think he's thinking about? He's thinking about a sandwich. Oh, it's making me hungry. So he's thinking about having some food. Now, I think all of us think about eating food every day. So he's thinking about a particular sandwich. I think there's a bit of lettuce, tomato, and ham, maybe. Looks delicious. So yeah, so he's thinking about food. Okay, remember, having individual liberty means being able to make certain choices, like what we like to do in our spare time, what we eat, animals we like, and the friends that we have. Okay, so individual liberty is about having a choice. So, liberty means being free from oppression or restrictions by the government or powers. So it means that we're able to do things, okay, without being stopped. Okay, as long as it's the right thing to do. Now think about this. Okay. Now, can you think of a time in history when people have been oppressed or restricted by a government, so stopped to do something by a government? Okay. Now we have had a few assemblies on. We had like Martin Luther King. We talked about the story about Rosa Parks, okay, recently, where she was stopped from going on a bus, or the bus, she had to give up her seat because she wasn't white. Okay, what other things? Now, an example of this would be, for example, in South Africa between 1948 and 1991, a system known as apartheid meant that black people were not allowed in the same places as white people. Okay, so that's a time when we've been stopped to do something. Okay, we're quite lucky in that there was a time when some genders, for example, females, weren't allowed to vote. Okay, they weren't allowed to vote. Okay, and then men were allowed to vote. But now we all have that opportunity to do something. Or some point, some people weren't allowed to go have an education. Okay. Now, what are your rights? So, can you think about what your rights are? What are you allowed to do? Okay, what is everyone allowed to do? Oh, sorry. So what rights do you have? Okay, so you might want to talk to the people in your class, okay, or if you're at home, your parents or carers, or your teachers if you're in school, or another member of staff. What are your rights? What are you allowed to do? So there is a thing called the Human Rights Act. It was written in 1988, and it was 14 rights that each person should have. So we have the freedom of our own opinions, thoughts, beliefs, and religions. So everyone has the freedom for their own opinions, thoughts, beliefs, and religion. Okay, so you have that choice. And you're allowed to be protected from discrimination. So that means when someone may not agree with what you're doing and they may act upon it. Okay, they may act upon it. And when they act upon it, they may not be the nicest of people, and it can cause harm. So everyone has a right to an education. So everyone has a right to go to school, like all of you do now, and you have a right to listen to this fantastic assembly. Okay, you all have a right to an education. You have freedom from slavery. So in the past, in history, you know, there are moments where we haven't been so kind to each other and the human race has enslaved another race. It still happens now, but just not on the scale that it used to be. But everyone has freedom from slavery. And you must, and people should have the respect for your private life and family and not intrude on those things, okay? And you have a right to liberty, and we've talked about what liberty means, okay? And you have a right to be safe, you know? And at the minute, we're all trying to stay safe at the minute from the pandemic, okay? So you have a right for your liberty and to be safe. Ooh. Okay, so there are lots of other things, but I think they're probably the ones that we are going to focus on today. Yeah, so does it mean people can do anything they want? So everyone has individual liberty, but this does not mean people can do what they want, okay? There are rules to follow to keep everyone safe and that we must respect, and it is important to follow advice from certain people, okay? So even though the government, we don't want the government to stop us from doing everything, but there are certain guidelines that make us safer, okay? We did talk about the rule of law a couple of weeks ago, okay? A part of this is very much linked together, but, you know, some things are there to make sure everyone can be in society and get along. So let's have a look. Let's go to the parent role, okay? Now, the parent's role is to keep us safe, warm, healthy, and sheltered, okay? So keeping you safe is why parents tell you what time you need to be at home, to ask where you are going, and maybe say they aren't happy with how you behave, okay? We've all been there, okay? I've had that from my parents, and I do that to my son at the minute. And when you are with certain friends, so you might feel that you have no freedom at all, but your parents do keep you safe, okay? Their main job is to keep you safe. Let's have a look at the teacher. Now, you may not always like the lesson or feel like being in school, but your teacher needs to help you learn and stay safe in school, okay? This means they cannot let you leave school just because you'd rather be at home. So we can't let you be in school. Remember, everyone has a right to education. The teacher's job is to make you learn, feel safe, and be the best that you can be, okay? So look at the doctor. Okay, so a doctor have a duty of care. That means they advise and give medicine. So if you are in a hospital, it is their responsibility to keep you safe and help you recover. Even if people don't want to be in hospital, the doctors cannot let you leave, okay, until you feel, they can only let you leave when you're well. Okay, and they give you lots of advice for you to follow to make sure you stay that way. And the police lady there, you know, and we've talked about the police before, about there to maintain law and order. And they have a responsibility to keep everyone safe from harm. This means that they can take away people's freedom if there are a danger to others or themselves. So let them, some people go to prisons or go to some other institutions that may help them. And the law is there for the benefit of all people, okay? So consequently, people cannot always do what they want. Okay, we can do most things, but there are certain things that we need to follow the guidelines. For example, at the minute, we're all asked to wear a mask to keep ourselves safe and everyone else safe. And then we're all asked to maybe not go outside as much. So at the minute, the government and the has given us some guidelines to make ourselves feel safe. Even though we may not like it, we all know it's probably the best thing to do at the minute. Okay, so what it means. Okay, so individual liberty does not mean you are free to do what you want. It means you are free to do what's right. Okay, and if you look at here, the scales, it's trying to say there's a balance. Okay, everyone's living in the society in a balance. Okay. So everyone's individual liberty, okay? There may be times when we try to stop people having the individual liberty. So let's have a think. Oh, sorry. So think about a time you have tried to get someone to do something you wanted them to do. Now, we've all done this, okay? So think about a time you have tried to get someone to do something you wanted them to do, okay? So we need to reflect on our own behavior. So remember, everyone has their own individual liberty. Now, sometimes you may have asked someone to play a game and they probably didn't really want to, and they may have been upset. There's lots of different scenarios that this can happen. Okay. And was it the right thing to do to try and make that person or a group of people do what you wanted to do? Sometimes it might be just that you're trying to advise or encourage, but it's sometimes the way that we say it, or the way that if we're really forceful, or are we just trying to be kind? What do you think? Can you give any examples to the people around you? So remember, everyone should have their individual liberty. Okay? Just as no one should stop our individual liberty, we should not prevent anyone else's. So this means being more understanding of others. Okay, so maybe respecting their opinion, or maybe ask questions to find out what they're trying to tell you. So thinking of others rather than ourselves. Now, it is important that we look after ourselves, but it is just as important to look after other people. Okay, so show empathy. And then try to see things from other people's point of view. Now, this is a very, very hard thing to do. Okay, and as you get older, I would say it's one of the hardest things to do, because you get a bit set in your ways, but to try to see things from other people's point of view is very, very important. And then valuing everyone's input and opinion. So it's not important to put someone else's opinion higher than someone that you may not be friends with or have a great deal of feeling for. However, everyone's input and opinions should be on the same level, okay? Well, try to be on the same level. It's a very, very hard thing to do, but we're all going to try and do this. And then on reflection. So think about a time you tried to stop someone having their individual liberty, and we talked about that before, okay? And think about how they may have felt, and think about how you could have done things differently, okay? So sometimes these things happen as parents. Like myself, I try and tell my son, and I know sometimes he's a bit unhappy about it, but I'm trying to do it for the best for him, okay? And sometimes I might be able to say it a bit differently, okay? But you might have these things in your life so far, okay? But individual liberty is about having liberties, about having some choices out there, but make sure you're the right choices to make, okay, for yourself and for everyone else. Stop sharing the screen. Now, I hope everyone had some really great thinking time there and really thought about what individual liberty means. Okay, so we do have some more assemblies coming up, so I will see you then. We've got one more on British values, and I'll see if you can work out which one we need to do. Okay, because we've done the mutual respect and the tolerance, we've done rule of law, and today we've done individual liberty. So there is one left that begins with D. Okay, I'm not going to tell you what that is. Try and work it out for yourself. But I will see you next week for your next assembly. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.